Hello, good morning and welcome to the Finance Show here on tiptv.co.uk. It is 10:15 a.m. on Friday the 9th of June 2017. We've just got the last vestiges of the election results, so we seem to be back where we were 24 hours ago, in the sense that Theresa May has cobbled together a small majority. Marc Ostwald, strategist at ADM Investor Services, what's your call on all this?
Well, it's clearly been an election which has badly backfired on Mrs. May. The fact that she's going to have some pact with the Democratic Unionist Party from Northern Ireland to keep her in government does not make things difficult. Does make things difficult, particularly given that there are a lot of problems in terms of the Brexit negotiations associated with Northern Ireland. Where it leaves us, though, is the likelihood that Mrs. May's position is not really tenable in the long run. So we are likely to face, at some stage, even if not immediately, a leadership challenge. And I can't say that I think the EU or indeed the governments in Berlin or Paris are going to be particularly pleased by this result, simply because what they wanted was not necessarily an intransigent Conservative government negotiating, but they do want to actually have a government which has a clear position, which this one may not.
Well, they might be relieved. They might think that the UK might not actually go in the end.
I doubt that very much. Reversing the whole Article 50 process actually requires the consent of the other 27 countries for a start.
I'll be delighted.
No, I think really where it leaves the UK is with a lot of uncertainty. I think the damage which has been done in terms of business investment, you've not only got the uncertainty surrounding the Brexit negotiations, but also whether the government will last. And therefore, for a lot of people, particularly foreign investors, but also domestic investors, the incentive to start new or plan for new investments is very, very low. And that can't help the economy at a time where we really need the business side of the economy to step up to make up for what's likely to be a slower pace of consumer spending, simply because consumers are so indebted.
So it feels like we're back in 1974 or something like that.
Not dissimilar.
Okay. I thought you were going to say no, but it is that bad. All right, start off with the slides. Heard on Twitter, David Buick, our old friend from Pamela Gordon. Cable falls to 127.08. It may drift in the next few weeks. Uncertainty over Brexit unless a workable policy is confirmed to go to Brussels. So, in a way, that's not the worst that we have, really, because we have the problem at home, really. It's the domestic politics which is the real problem, isn't it?
Well, clearly, that's clearly what this has been fought on. Overall, actually, I'd say that the fall that we've seen in the cable has actually not been that dramatic when one thinks of some of the falls that we saw last year. So it's been reasonably well contained. It probably may well be contained today, simply because people don't like going at home with big positions over the weekend. So we may have to wait until next week to see just how much damage this may do to the pound.
And obviously we're still 20 cents or more below where we were in June, so
indeed,
the horror is already factored in. Next on Twitter we have Kathleen Brooks. It's looking increasingly likely to me that this vote was also a backlash against hard Brexit. UK wants out of EU, but not at any cost. And that wasn't talked about, that was hardly talked about at all. As it was supposed to be a Brexit, let's say, election, but it became other things, didn't it?
It became a lot of other things. The amazing thing about the election, it wasn't really much about Brexit negotiations, and there was barely any mention of the economy. Perhaps because both sides realised that the economy is about to hit a rough spot, and they don't really have any prescriptions on how to soothe that rough spot.
Okay, let's go on to Theo Leggett. Just to put sterling's fall into context, it's only fallen to the level it was at mid-April and still well above lows hit last year, so echoing your words of wisdom there. And we move along to FX sentiment. I thought it'd be interesting just to look at this slide. We could have skated over it, but people were short up to the eyeballs of euro sterling going into the election result, and presumably with the 2 pence rise that we've had, or a penny and a half, I think, they won't be feeling very comfortable this morning, probably as uncomfortable as Theresa May, I would have thought. Very short of the euro, which I suppose ties in a bit with the antics of the ECB yesterday, doesn't it?
Well, to a certain extent, though, if you actually look at the commitment of traders' position on the IMM, this is the biggest long that we've seen in the euro in 10 years outside of 2011. So there is an interesting contrast there.
Okay, and the people were short of the pound beforehand, so they on cable they made up for some of their bruised positions on the euro sterling.
Yes.
Right, next up we've got trade of the day, sentiment, gold mining stock, daily chart, higher bottom bullish RSI, buy around 175, objective 193, stops below 164, and we've seen that on the sort of the top of the FTSE 100 today, because of the dollar strength or the pound weakness, we've got Fresnillo and Randgold Resources leading the way higher. FTSE around 7,500 at the moment. Next, we've got broker recommendations. BT Group sell at Deutsche Bank. I think they've changed their auditors. I wonder why they would. I believe it's from KPMG to PwC. A poison chalice if ever there was one. Quite how, if you pay an auditor, presumably quite good money, how they can sort of £500 million can just disappear.
Yes, one does have to wonder, doesn't one?
I really don't understand that. But anyway, Shire Pharma, we've got a buy there from Jefferies. Shares currently at £43, and Jefferies decided that perhaps the old target of £64 is a little bit optimistic. Perhaps the £56 might be rather optimistic as well. And then an area I know absolutely nothing about, cars, but Auto Trader, I know it's got a good position in its market, in its segment. Profits are up by a quarter last year, and Deutsche Bank is celebrating that with a hold on the shares at 4.35. Finally, Mark, we've got Theresa May going to form a government, going to ask Her Majesty the Queen if she can form a government at 12:30 this afternoon. Is it just going to be a painful time over the next few days?
I think so. I think what's going to be the most interesting is what the Bow Group, who are the very right-wing group or faction of the Conservative Party, do. They have been calling for fresh leadership elections, and I think we're going to focus a lot on that. There is an argument which says, on the other hand, that there are no obvious successors. There are people who obviously would challenge, but on the other hand, does anyone really want to take over this rather poisoned chalice and be in government? Wouldn't they rather let her take all the flack for what's going to be a very difficult period of government?
So she can stew in her own juice?
Effectively, yes.
Marc Ostwald, strategist at ADM Investor Services International, thank you for opening the Tip TV Finance show today.